Shadows on the Wall, A Confession in the Spotlight. Act 1, The Ashes of Hollywood and the Birth of a Shadow. Chapter 1, The Silk Lie of 1947, Hollywood. 1947. A city of golden dust where dreams were sold wholesale and souls retail. Post-war America was healing its wounds under the watchful gaze of noir shadows and magnesium flashes. It was a world where behind silk dresses and perfect smiles hid a sticky web of studio lies, blackmail, and the merciless Hays Code that censored life as ruthlessly as it did art. Evelyn Brooks, 24, was part of that world, yet always remained offstage. An orphan raised within the strict walls of St. Margaret's Catholic orphanage, she carried a mark of quiet restraint that only highlighted her natural, almost mystical beauty. High cheekbones, eyes the color of September fog, and a tense, silent gaze, as if she saw something invisible to others. Her world was a tiny, mothball-scented office at an acting school on Sunset Boulevard. Her role, secretary, girl at the desk, silent passerby in the background, a shadow against which others shone. But every trace of her shadow on a studio wall held more drama than the lines of many stars. She knew one truth. Hollywood was, above all, light that cast the longest, most deceitful shadows. Chapter 2. The touch of noir. That gray Tuesday, a man walked into her office smelling of expensive tobacco and power. Raymond Clark, director demiurge of the noir era, whose films like A Kiss Without Return and The Night You'll Never Forget defined the genre. A man shadow whose movies were as brutal as truth itself and as graceful as the curve of a woman's shoulder. Clark didn't look at her the way producers did, calculatingly, or like actors did, condescendingly. He looked through her as if searching not for Evelyn Brooks, but for someone who lived inside her. Evelyn Brooks, right? His voice was dry as an autumn leaf and suddenly sharp. You'll play the lead role. Evelyn, used to being just a silent passerby, felt the ground slip away beneath her. The lead role. In Raymond Clark's new film. The title sounded like a verdict, Shadows on the Wall. It's the story of Lauren Miller, he explained, unblinking. An actress murdered in 37 in her mansion on the hills. Brutal, mysterious, the killer was never found. In his office, drowned in thick velvet darkness, Clark opened the script. The main character, Isolde, a young starlet whose dazzling career ends at its peak. As Evelyn read the murder scene, a strange, piercing ache tightened in her chest. Raymond watched her closely, leaning in until the scent of tobacco mixed with something sharper, guilt perhaps, or fear. I've been searching for this face for 12 years, Evelyn, for that same light, he whispered, his finger brushing her cheek. But in his eyes, another woman flickered, the ghost of Lauren Miller. And then, with one fatal sentence, he placed the first stone in the tomb of her soul. You'll play her as if you truly knew her. Otherwise, the film won't be real. Evelyn agreed. Because Hollywood is an altar where one sacrifices not only time, but the soul itself, for the sake of a role. Act 2, The Voice in the Mirror. Chapter 3, The Studio's Breath. The silver screen studio stood abandoned, like a mausoleum. The worn-down sound stages, covered in decades of dust, resembled catacombs where every shadow seemed to hold the remains of forgotten lives. Filming had begun. Evelyn, submerged in the role of Isolde, of Lauren really, felt like a vessel filled with someone else's spirit. She wore Lauren's dresses, spoke in her tone, carried her shadow. The strange things started almost immediately. On the set designed to look like the old mansion on the hills, objects kept moving on their own. The cut glass ashtray Evelyn always placed at the edge of the desk would later appear in the middle. Books on the shelves opened to the same pages, pages with love poems. And in the huge cracked mirrors that Clark loved to use for noir depth, Evelyn sometimes saw not her own reflection. For a heartbeat, another face flashed back at her, softer but with that same mist in the eyes. Lauren Miller's face. The eeriest part appeared on the sound recordings. During the key takes, when Evelyn was meant to show fear or despair, the microphones picked up a quiet but distinct female whisper. The sound engineer dismissed it as interference, but Evelyn heard it clearly through the speakers as if it were her own inner voice, drowned by fear. Don't look at him. At who? Evelyn wondered, and her gaze involuntarily drifted toward Raymond Clark. He always stood in the shadows, his eyes like two black holes devouring her performance. Chapter 4. The Photo Frame and the Betrayal of Memory. One day during a break, Evelyn sat in her dressing room. a cramped space that had once belonged to second-rate actresses in the 1930s. Suddenly, she felt a sharp, icy chill. Beneath an old warped table, among broken brushes and dusty powder compacts, she found a faded photograph. A picture from the 1930s. Two young women. One was Lauren Miller, her character. She was radiant, wearing a flowing backless gown, laughing at some private joke. The other woman stood slightly apart. Modest dress, hair neatly pulled back, a tired but hauntingly familiar gaze. A tense, misty look. The same one Evelyn saw in the mirror every morning. Evelyn's breath caught. The story she'd been told at the orphanage said her mother, known only by name, Catherine Brooks, had died giving birth. A quiet, humble woman with no connection to Hollywood. But in the photo, the second woman was her mother, Catherine Brooks. Lauren Miller and her mother had known each other. More than that, they had been photographed together, surrounded by the air of studio bohemia. At that moment, the facade Evelyn had built her whole life collapsed. The orphanage story was a lie, meant to hide her from something or someone. She wasn't just playing Lauren Miller, she was the daughter of the victim's friend. Maybe more. Chapter 5. The script as a diary. From that day on, Evelyn began her own investigation, driven not by ambition, but by an animal instinct to uncover the truth of her origin. She became a noir detective herself, searching for truth in a world where truth was the worst crime of all. She learned more about Lauren. Lauren hadn't been killed by a thief. She had been the soul of the studio, its muse, its scandal. Her death had been called a crime of passion, but there were no signs of struggle, no forced entry. And the most important things: one, Raymond Clark had been Lauren Miller's lover. Their affair was intense, secret, and ended only days before her murder. Two, he disappeared. Right after Lauren's death, Clark, then the main suspect, vanished from Hollywood. He returned 2 years later, cleansed and forgiven, to direct his famous noirs, each revolving around a fatal woman and her cruel punishment. 3. The script. In Clark's office, Evelyn found early drafts, on the first page written in his hand, to my Lauren as redemption and confession. The script of Shadows on the Wall wasn't fiction. It was a meticulously reconstructed diary of the murder. Every line spoken by a sold, every reaction of the killer, called the screenwriter in the script, read like a painfully detailed confession. Evelyn understood then. Clark never wanted to make a film. He wanted to build an alibi, to mythologize his crime, and, most of all, to make her, Evelyn, relive the death of her mother's friend. Maybe even her mother herself. She studied the old photograph again. Her mother, Catherine, had been Lauren's shadow, an assistant, a confidant, a witness. Act 3, Death on Stage. Chapter 6, The Mansion Tomb. The shooting of the final scene, the death of Isolde. Location, the same old mansion on the hills where Lauren Miller was found dead in 1937. An abandoned, suffocating building, more skeleton than home. Clark insisted the scene had to be filmed there, so the walls would remember. Evelyn, dressed in an exact replica of Lauren's fatal silk gown with pale makeup, stood in the living room. On the floor, the fake blood was already painted in place. Everything was ready for death. The crew, crushed by the ghostly atmosphere of the place, was tense. Raymond Clark, usually calm and precise, was restless, almost feverish. He never left the camera. "Lights!" he shouted. The spotlights came on, throwing deep, dramatic shadows. Evelyn Isolde was to stand by the window, then turn and meet her fate. The camera began to hum. Evelyn acted out fear, but it wasn't Isolde's fear. It was Catherine Brooks's fear, her mother's, a fear she had carried inside her since birth. Clark stepped closer, breaking the unspoken rule that directors never invade the scene. He was too close. His breath brushed her ear. "Now it will be just like then," he whispered, his voice barely audible, but filled with steel and madness. "Don't be afraid. The shadow must die beautifully." Evelyn froze. That wasn't direction. It was recreation. He knew how she would die. He knew why. He knew because he was the screenwriter and the killer. Chapter 7, The Camera as a Weapon. This wasn't a scene anymore. It was a reenactment, a ritual murder where she wasn't the actress, but the victim brought back to the crime scene. Evelyn tried to run, but the door to the living room, just like in the script, was locked. Clark's men, his assistant and the guard, stood watch. He had planned everything. The room turned into a surreal nightmare. The spotlights flickered like demon eyes, throwing twisted shadows across the walls and ceiling. The furniture seemed alive, breathing with history, fear, and Lauren's ghost. Evelyn stumbled through the set, hearing Clark's heavy, fast breathing behind her. Suddenly, she tripped over an old, heavy tripod camera, a 35mm Mitchell. A whisper flashed in her mind, her mother's voice. Don't look at him. Light. Don't look. Weapon. Evelyn jumped up, grabbed the heavy camera, the symbol of Hollywood, of its power and lies, and without turning around, aimed it like the barrel of a gun right at Clark. She knew what he wanted, immortality. He wanted his crime to live on through art. She shouted, her voice breaking through fear and his approaching footsteps. You wanted eternity, Raymond? Here it is. Your confession. Turn on the lights and roll the film. His assistant, shocked and clearly unaware of Clark's real plan, ran to the control panel. Light exploded, blinding, merciless. Clark, caught in the blaze of light and camera, the symbols of his own power, froze. The lens pointed at him was like sunlight to a vampire. You're not Lauren, he screamed, his face twisting into madness. Lauren was the shadow. You're supposed to be the shadow. Evelyn hit the record switch. The film began to spin, capturing every twitch, every tremor of his face. Lauren wanted to leave me. She wanted to expose me, to ruin the image. I was fixing her, making her perfect, eternal. The word she had been waiting for, a confession. Clark, losing all control, lunged toward the camera to destroy his own confession. At that moment, Evelyn, driven by a power that wasn't hers anymore, a power that belonged to Lauren and Catherine, swung the heavy metal body of the camera with all her strength and struck him in the face. The glass lens shattered. A dull, wet sound followed. Clark collapsed. The scene was over. On the floor of the mansion tomb where Lauren Miller had died 12 years earlier lay the body of Raymond Clark. And on the spot where the fake blood was supposed to be, there was real blood. Evelyn let out a scream, the same one written in the script, but this time it was real, a scream of horror and release. She fainted, still dressed as her character. Her hand clutched the broken camera, the weapon and the witness in one. Hauser Act 4, The Birth of a Legend and a New Shadow. Chapter 8, The Montage of Light and Lies. The police arrived in the early morning, just as the first light touched the studio. They found Clark's body, the broken camera, and Evelyn, alive but frozen in shock. They found the film. The tape. The camera, like a loyal dog, had captured the last fatal moments, his confession. The trial was quick and sensational. The recording, where the director confessed to a murder from 12 years ago and to his new attempt, cleared Evelyn Brooks completely. It was self-defense. The movie Shadows on the Wall was banned. The studio tried to bury the scandal. But Hollywood lives on myths, and this one was too delicious to die. 6 months later, thanks to a young, ruthless editor, a film under the same name hit the screens. Shadows on the Wall. It was a so-called director's cut, edited from Clark's recovered footage and ending with the shocking final scene, his confession and his death at Evelyn's hands. The editor called it the new realism. The film became a sensation far beyond any genre. It wasn't just cinema anymore. It was a documented crime turned into art. Evelyn Brooks, a woman who had walked through hell, became Hollywood's new star overnight, the femme fatale who survived the noir. Chapter 9. The Ghost on the Screen premiere night. Grauman's Theater, Hollywood. Evelyn sits in a private box, dressed in black. Her flawless face shines under the flashlights. She got her role. She got her fame. The lights dim. The film begins. Evelyn watches the screen where her mother, Catherine, and her friend Lauren come to life again in shadows. And then herself in the final scene, screaming at Clark. As the scene ends, the scream, the shattered camera, the screen suddenly goes dark for a moment. And in that brief darkness, on the smooth surface of the screen, she sees her shadow. She sees Evelyn in black, sitting in her box, moving her head slightly, nodding in rhythm with the applause. But her shadow on the screen moves on its own. The shadow, taller, slimmer, and eerily graceful, slowly raises a hand as if to fix its hair. Evelyn doesn't move. And then in the deafening silence only she can hear, a soft, familiar whisper fills her mind, a voice from the tape. Lauren's voice, or maybe Catherine's. You're in my place now, darling. Too much light. Here, the shadows live longer than people. Evelyn feels a chill. She stares at the screen. The camera, like a ghostly operator, begins a slow, relentless zoom toward her shadow. On the screen, in enormous scale, her shadow and the one moving separately merge into one, into the shadow that will haunt her forever. The shadow of Lauren Miller, the woman she played as if she'd known her. The theater erupts in applause, a standing ovation. Evelyn Brooks, the legend. She rises, her smile flawless, but her eyes, the color of September fog, carry the same silent old pain. Hollywood still glows with its bright signs, blind to the truth that in its darkness, not just a new star was born, but a new shadow, one that found its eternity.